The act of writing has defined human civilization for 1,000s of years, tracing its origins back to the earliest clay tablets of Sumer in Mesopotamia around 3400 BC. For 100s of years following the invention of early writing systems, the primary tools for capturing human thought and economic transactions were the stylus, the quill, and eventually the ink pen. Monks, scribes, and clerks spent 1,000s of hours copying texts by hand, one letter at a time, in a slow and painstaking process that bottlenecked the flow of information across empires. Even after the groundbreaking invention of the mechanical printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in 1440 AD, which brilliantly solved the problem of mass production for books and broadsheets, the realm of personal and business correspondence remained strictly manual. While a printing press could stamp out 1,000s of copies of one single page in a matter of hours, an individual letter, or a specific business ledger, still had to be written one character at a time by a human hand. As the global economy expanded and the Industrial Revolution began to accelerate in the 18th century AD, a new mechanical age dawned, bringing with it a profound and urgent desire to mechanize the act of writing itself. This is the exhaustive and fascinating story of how humans invented the typewriter, a complex machine that would revolutionize global communication, radically transform the modern office environment, and pave the mechanical groundwork for the digital keyboards we interact with 100s of times a day in the modern era. The earliest conceptualization of a writing machine dates back to 1714 AD, during the reign of Queen Anne in Great Britain. A British engineer and waterworks manager named Henry Mill obtained a royal patent for a machine that was vaguely described in the official documents as an artificial machine or method for the impressing or transcribing of letters singly or progressively, one after another, as in writing. Mill was clearly a visionary who understood the need for clear, legible, and uniform text that could not be easily forged. Yet there is zero historical evidence that he ever successfully built a working prototype of his invention. The manufacturing technology of the early 18th century AD simply lacked the precision engineering, the standardized parts, and the metallurgical advancements required to bring such a complex, multi-part mechanism to life. For nearly 100 years after Mill's patent, the idea of a mechanical writing device remained largely a theoretical dream, a mere footnote in the history of invention waiting for the right combination of human necessity and advanced manufacturing capability to arrive. The first documented, fully working typewriter emerged not from a capitalist desire for business efficiency, but from a profound human need for accessibility and emotional connection. In 1808 AD, an Italian inventor and mechanic named Pellegrino Turri built a functioning writing machine specifically for his close friend, Countess Carolina Fantoni da Fivizzano. The Countess suffered from a condition that had caused her to lose her sight entirely, and Turri desperately wanted to provide her with a way to write personal letters independently without having to dictate her private thoughts to a scribe. While the physical machine itself has tragically been lost to the ravages of history, 16 of the highly legible letters typed by the Countess still survive in archives today, bearing undeniable witness to this remarkable invention. To make the machine work and produce visible text, Turri also invented a primitive form of carbon paper, inserting a layer of ink-soaked paper between the mechanical keys and the writing surface, which provided the ink needed to transfer the impressions onto the page. This early machine demonstrated definitively that mechanical writing was physically possible, though it remained a bespoke, individual creation rather than a scalable commercial product for the masses. Over the next 50 years, dozens of amateur and professional inventors across Europe and North America attempted to create their own unique versions of the typewriter, resulting in a bizarre array of mechanical contraptions. In 1829 AD, an American surveyor named William Austin Burt patented a large wooden device he called the typographer. Burt's machine consisted of letters mounted on a rotating semicircular frame. To type a word, the user had to manually turn a dial to select the desired letter, align it perfectly, and then press down on a heavy lever to make the ink impression. While it was technically a functional device, the typographer was incredibly slow and cumbersome. In fact, it was significantly slower than writing out a letter by hand, which meant it completely failed to find a commercial market among businessmen who valued speed. The original patent model of Burt's typographer was destroyed in a massive patent office fire in 1836 AD, though replicas were later built based on his detailed parchment descriptions. In 1833 AD, a French inventor named Xavier Progan made a crucial mechanical breakthrough when he patented a machine known as the cryptographic machine. Progen's device was the first to use separate individual type bars for each letter. His design featured a circular basket of 66 levers that struck downwards onto the paper, acting independently of one another. This specific concept of individual type bars, arranged in a circle, would become the foundational architecture for the vast majority of manual typewriters built over the next 100 years. Following Progen, an Italian lawyer named Giuseppe Ravizza spent 30 years perfecting a machine he called the cembalo scrivano, or the harpsichord scribe, patented in 1855 AD. Ravizza's machine was revolutionary because it used 16 piano-style keys and introduced the concept of an inked ribbon, rather than carbon paper or ink rollers. Despite these brilliant mechanical advancements, Progen's and Ravizza's machines, like those before them, failed to gain widespread global traction. The world simply was not yet ready for the typewriter, and the specialized manufacturing techniques required to produce them cheaply and reliably did not yet exist. The true turning point in the history of the typewriter arrived in the late 1860s AD in the bustling industrial city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Christopher Latham Sholes, a local newspaper editor, printer, and politician, was working in a small machine shop on a specialized device designed to automatically number the pages of blank books and serial tickets. Along with his colleagues Samuel W. Soule, a printer, and Carlos Glidden, an amateur inventor, Sholes realized that their numbering machine could be adapted to print alphabetical letters instead of just numbers. Their inspiration was sparked by a detailed article in an 1867 AD issue of Scientific American describing a prototype typewriter built by John Pratt in 1865 AD called the Pterotype. Seeing the potential, the three men shifted their focus entirely and began developing a comprehensive writing machine that could type the entire English alphabet. By the end of 1867 AD, Sholes, Glidden, and Soule had successfully constructed a working prototype of their new invention. Their early machine was visually crude, famously described by onlookers as looking like a bizarre cross between a small piano and a kitchen table. It featured a keyboard with 2 rows of black and white piano-like keys and struck upwards against a piece of tissue paper clamped securely against a glass plate. The machine worked, and it could print legible text, but it was plagued by a critical mechanical flaw. It was highly prone to jamming. If the user typed too quickly, the long metal type bars, which were arranged in a tight circular basket beneath the paper, would swing up, clash together in the center, and become hopelessly tangled. The typist would then have to stop, reach into the machine, and spend tens of seconds physically unjamming the delicate metal arms. This frustrating mechanical limitation would force Sholes to make a specific design decision that still dictates exactly how we interact with computers in the 21st century AD. To solve the infuriating jamming problem, Sholes spent hundreds of hours meticulously analyzing the frequency of letter combinations in the English language, aided by the brother of his financial backer, educator Amos Densmore. The initial keyboards were arranged in alphabetical order, which placed commonly used letter pairs right next to each other in the mechanical basket. Sholes realized that if he placed these frequently used letter pairs, such as T and H or S and E, far apart from each other on the physical keyboard, the mechanical arms would come from opposite sides of the basket. This would give the type bars more time to return to their resting positions before the next key was struck, drastically reducing the chance of a collision. This layout was designed specifically to physically separate the most frequently struck type bars to prevent the machine from jamming, while still maintaining an efficient flow of movement for the typist. After tens of iterations and countless structural rearrangements, Sholes finalized this precise arrangement in 1873 AD. The first 6 letters on the top left row of his newly finalized keyboard spelled out QWERTY. The QWERTY layout was born not out of a desire for ergonomic efficiency or typing speed, but out of strict, unavoidable mechanical necessity to keep the machine functioning smoothly. While Sholes was perfecting the QWERTY layout in America, across the Atlantic Ocean in 1870 AD, a Danish pastor and director of a deaf-mute institute named Rasmus Malling Hansen introduced a very different kind of typewriter known as the Hansen writing ball. This extraordinary device looked like a metallic pincushion or a brass echidna, with 52 keys arranged neatly on a hemispherical dome over a piece of paper. The keys were positioned carefully so that the most frequently used letters were typed by the fastest fingers, making it one of the first ergonomically designed keyboards in history. The Hansen writing ball was remarkably fast in the hands of a skilled operator and became the first commercially produced typewriter in history, selling in small quantities across Europe. The famous philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, struggling with failing vision, even purchased one in 1882 AD to assist with his writing. He wrote several poems about the device, though he eventually complained that it was prone to mechanical issues in damp weather. However, the writing ball was expensive to manufacture and visually unconventional, and it ultimately lost out to the highly capitalized American designs that were about to flood the global market. Back in America, Sholes and his partners were struggling mightily to secure the immense capital needed to mass-produce their QWERTY typewriter. They eventually caught the attention of James Densmore, a wealthy and eccentric businessman who saw the immense, world-changing potential of the device and aggressively purchased a 25% stake in the patent. Densmore ruthlessly pushed Sholes to refine the machine, demanding over 50 different prototypes over the span of 5 years. Whenever a prototype failed under heavy use, Densmore would send it back to Milwaukee demanding further improvements. Densmore finally realized they needed a large-scale manufacturer with the advanced precision engineering capabilities to produce the complex machine in mass. Quantities. In 1873 AD, he traveled to Ilion, New York, and struck a historic deal with E. Remington & Sons, a massive manufacturing company that had made its fortune producing firearms, agricultural equipment, and sewing machines during the American Civil War. The Remington Company applied its vast expertise in precision mechanics and standardized parts to the Sholes and Glidden design. They agreed to produce a batch of 1,000 machines. The resulting machine, officially released to the public in 1874 AD, was known as the Sholes and Glidden Typewriter, or simply the Remington No. 1. Because it was built in a sewing machine factory, it heavily featured sewing machine aesthetics. It came mounted on a sewing machine stand, featured a foot pedal to return the carriage, and its black metal casing was ornately decorated with hand-painted floral patterns. Despite its revolutionary capabilities, the Remington No. 1 was not an immediate commercial success. It cost $125, which was a staggering sum of money in 1874 AD, roughly equivalent to over $3,500 today. Furthermore, the machine only typed in uppercase capital letters, which gave business correspondence an aggressive, shouting appearance that many traditional businessmen found off-putting and disrespectful. It was the introduction of the significantly improved Remington No. 2 in 1878 AD that truly catalyzed the global typewriter revolution. The Remington No. 2 elegantly solved the uppercase-only problem by introducing a brilliant mechanical innovation, the shift key. By pressing the shift key, the typist physically shifted the heavy cylindrical carriage holding the paper, allowing a second character engraved on the same metal type bar to strike the page. This simple but ingenious mechanism allowed the machine to type both uppercase and lowercase letters, as well as numbers and symbols, without doubling the number of keys on the physical keyboard. The shift key made the typewriter a truly versatile and professional tool, perfectly suitable for all forms of formal business and personal communication, and it remains a standard, indispensable feature on every single computer keyboard manufactured today. The 1880s AD witnessed an absolute explosion in typewriter adoption across the industrialized world. As massive corporations expanded and became exponentially more complex during the second half of the 19th century AD, the sheer volume of paperwork and correspondence grew to unmanageable levels. The typewriter offered a perfect solution, allowing clerks to produce highly legible documents much faster than they could by handwriting. A skilled typist could easily achieve speeds of 60 to 80 words per minute, drastically increasing office productivity and standardizing corporate communication. The typewriter also brought about a profound sociological shift that completely reshaped the workforce. Prior to the 1880s AD, office work was almost exclusively a male domain. But the sudden demand for thousands of typists created a massive new avenue of employment specifically suited for women. In 1881 AD, the YWCA in New York began offering typing classes to a class of 8 women. Within 10 years, hundreds of thousands of young women had entered the workforce as typists and stenographers. By 1900 AD, nearly 80% of all typists in the United States were women, permanently altering the demographics of the modern office and providing women with a crucial, unprecedented path to financial independence and professional careers. Despite these rapid advancements, the early Remington machines and their competitors shared a significant, highly annoying flaw. They were blind writers. The type bars struck the absolute bottom of the rubber platen, meaning the typist could not actually see the words they were typing until they pressed a lever to roll the paper up a few lines. If a spelling mistake was made, it often went completely unnoticed until the entire document was finished and removed from the machine. This blind writing paradigm persisted for over 20 years, until the introduction of visible typewriters in the late 1890s AD. The Underwood No. 1, designed by Franz Xaver Wagner and introduced by John T. Underwood in 1895 AD, completely revolutionized the industry with its front-stroke design. In this new configuration, the type bars swung forward and struck the immediate front of the platen, allowing the typist to see the text exactly as it was being written on the page. The Underwood design proved so mechanically superior and popular that it quickly became the absolute industry standard, forcing every other manufacturer to adapt their designs or perish, and the Underwood Company went on to sell over 5,000 units by 1939 AD. As the 20th century AD dawned, the typewriter evolved from heavy office furniture into an indispensable, portable tool of modern life. In 1893 AD, the Blickensderfer Manufacturing Company introduced one of the first portable models, but it was in 1906 AD that the Corona Typewriter Company introduced the first truly successful folding portable typewriter, which would later evolve into the famous Corona 3 in 1912 AD. Weighing just under 6 pounds and featuring a carriage that folded forward over the keyboard to fit into a small carrying case, the portable typewriter allowed journalists, authors, and traveling businessmen to take their writing machines wherever they went. Writers like Ernest Hemingway and Mark Twain became inextricably linked with the image of their personal typewriters. Twain, in fact, was one of the first major authors to submit a fully typewritten manuscript to a publisher, sending in his famous book Life on the Mississippi in 1883 AD, proudly claiming he could type at a speed of 19 words per minute. During World War I in 1914 AD, portable typewriters were carried directly into the muddy trenches, becoming essential tools for military logistics, commanding officers, and war correspondents filing reports from the front lines. The next major monumental leap in typewriter technology came with the electrification of the mechanical action. While early electric prototypes had been experimented with since Thomas Edison filed a patent for an electrically operated printing wheel in 1872 AD, they were often highly unreliable and prone to electrical shorts. The Blickensderfer Electric of 1902 AD was one of the first commercial attempts, but it failed to find a market due to inconsistent electrical grids across the country. It was not until the 1920s AD that electric typewriters began to gain serious traction with the introduction of the electromatic typewriter. In 1933 AD, the International Business Machines Corporation, better known globally as IBM, purchased the Electromatic Company and invested heavily in producing highly successful electric models for the corporate market. Electric typewriters used an electric motor to power the stroke of the type bars, requiring only a very light touch from the typist's fingers. This drastically reduced physical fatigue for typists working 8-hour shifts and allowed for significantly faster typing speeds of over 100 words per minute. It also ensured that every single letter struck the page with perfectly uniform mechanical pressure, resulting in a crisp, flawlessly professional appearance that manual machines could never guarantee. The absolute pinnacle of electric typewriter engineering arrived in 1961 AD with the introduction of the legendary IBM Selectric. The Selectric completely discarded the traditional jam-prone basket of type bars that had defined the machine for 90 years. Instead, it used a single golf ball-sized rotating element that contained all 88 characters molded onto its surface. When a key was pressed, this type ball would tilt and rotate at lightning speed to align the correct letter, strike the page through an inked ribbon, and return to its starting position, all in the tiny fraction of a tenth of a second. The Selectric was a breathtaking marvel of mechanical engineering, featuring over 2,800 perfectly synchronized moving parts. Because there were absolutely zero type bars to jam together, typists could work at incredible, continuous speeds of up to 15 characters per second without fear of crashing the machine. Furthermore, the brilliant design meant the type ball could be easily snapped off and swapped out, allowing users to seamlessly change fonts, italicize text, or switch to foreign languages in a matter of 3 seconds. The Selectric completely dominated the corporate business world for 20 years, selling thousands of units and becoming an iconic visual symbol of mid-century corporate efficiency. By the 1970s AD and 1980s AD, the typewriter began to evolve further into the early word processor. Companies like IBM and Brother began incorporating rudimentary memory chips and small one-line LCD displays into their machines. This allowed users to type, edit, backspace, and store a few lines of text in digital memory before finally committing them mechanically to paper, eliminating the need for messy correction fluid. The IBM MT-ST, introduced in 1964 AD, had even used magnetic tape to store hundreds of pages of text. These electronic typewriters bridged the technological gap between purely mechanical devices and the personal computers that were rapidly appearing on the horizon. However, the meteoric rise of the personal computer in the late 20th century AD ultimately signaled the final end of the typewriter era. Powerful software programs like WordStar, WordPerfect, and eventually Microsoft Word offered unprecedented, limitless editing capabilities, formatting options, and digital storage, rendering the mechanical and electronic typewriter completely obsolete for most professional office applications. By the early 2000s AD, the mass production of mechanical typewriters had largely ceased globally. Yet, despite its total displacement by the modern computer, the profound legacy of the typewriter remains deeply and permanently ingrained in our daily lives. Every single time we sit down to work at a laptop, a desktop computer, or tap out a message on a smartphone glass screen, we physically interact with the exact QWERTY keyboard layout that Christopher Latham Sholes designed in 1873 AD, specifically to prevent mechanical metal type bars from jamming. The Shift key, the space bar, the Return key, the Tab key, and the Backspace key are all direct, unadulterated descendants of the mechanical typewriter interface. The very terminology of our digital typing, such as carriage return, uppercase, lowercase, and backspace, stubbornly persists in the digital age long after the physical mechanisms have vanished. The typewriter completely transformed humanity's fundamental relationship with the written word, radically accelerating the pace of global communication, empowering women in the workforce, and laying the exact mechanical groundwork for the digital information revolution. From Henry Mill's theoretical and unrealized patent in 1714 AD to the mechanical perfection of the IBM Selectric of 1961 AD, the brilliant invention and relentless evolution of the typewriter stands today as a profound testament to human ingenuity and our relentless, unyielding drive to capture, mechanize, and share our deepest thoughts with the entire world.